My name is Samantha Mitchell, 34 years old, and I have always been the family disappointment. Despite my successful web design business, my brother Eric remains the golden child. This Christmas, I arrived at my parents' suburban Boston home with expensive gifts and fragile hope that things would be different. The moment I stepped through that door, the familiar tension wrapped around me like an unwelcome hug. Nobody mentioned the incident from last year, but it hung in the air like a ghost. I was determined this Christmas would end differently. Before I tell you how my perfectly planned Christmas revenge unfolded, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And hit subscribe to join me for more stories about standing up for yourself. Growing up in our picture-perfect colonial house in suburban Boston, I learned early that in the Mitchell family hierarchy, I would always rank second to my older brother. Eric, 3 years my senior, captured our parents' attention and praise with an ease I could never replicate. While he collected trophies for football and baseball that still occupy the most prominent spots in our parents' living room display, my academic achievements gathered dust in storage boxes. Look at that arm. Dad would beam during Eric's baseball games, standing to cheer every time he pitched a strike. Mom would clap until her hands turned red. When I made honor roll for years straight, I got a quick "good job, honey," and a pat on the head. The pattern was established early. On my 10th birthday, I unwrapped a practical set of books while still remembering how, just months earlier, Eric's birthday had warranted a backyard carnival complete with a hired magician. When I questioned the disparity, Mom sighed. "Samantha, please don't start. Your brother needs more encouragement than you do." My mother, Margaret, a kindergarten teacher with a perpetual smile that rarely reached her eyes, specialized in keeping peace rather than establishing fairness. She'd intervene in our childhood disputes with the same practice line, "Sam, just let your brother have this one." There were hundreds of this ones throughout my childhood. Dad, Robert Mitchell, managed a local bank and believed in traditional family values, which somehow translated to Eric carrying the family legacy while I was expected to eventually marry well and produce grandchildren. My career ambitions were treated as a temporary diversion, a phase I'd outgrow when real life began. "Web design isn't really a stable career path, Sam," Dad would say over holiday dinners. As if my thriving business didn't provide me with an income that exceeded his own. Eric's pharmaceutical sales position comes with benefits and retirement. Never mind that I had built my company from scratch, while Eric had gotten his job through Dad's golf buddy. In the Mitchell family narrative, Eric was successfully climbing the corporate ladder while I was still finding myself. I escaped as soon as I could, earning a full scholarship to NYU while Eric attended the local state college on our parents' dime. Those 4 years gave me room to breathe, to discover who I was outside of Eric's shadow. I built a portfolio, made connections, and by graduation, had enough clients to start my own business. I settled in Brooklyn, coming home only for major holidays and occasional weekend visits. Each year, I made genuine attempts to bridge the distance. I'd send thoughtful birthday gifts, call regularly, and arrive at every Christmas with arms full of carefully selected presents. Yet somehow, I always left feeling like an outsider looking in at my own family. Christmas in the Mitchell house followed strict traditions. Dad hung lights along the roofline the weekend after Thanksgiving. Mom baked her signature cranberry orange cookies. The tree, always a Fraser for exactly 7 feet tall, was decorated with the same ornaments year after year, including the handmade ones Eric and I created in elementary school. Mine were stored in the back branches, while Eric's star made of popsicle sticks crowned the top. Extended family arrived promptly at 2 o'clock on Christmas Day. Dinner was served at 4, with Mom's turkey and Dad's carving ceremony as the centerpiece. Everyone had assigned seats that hadn't changed in a decade, until last year when everything fell apart. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs. The way conversations quieted when I entered rooms. The forced smiles and overly polite inquiries about my business that never delved beneath surface level. I was so desperate to belong that I ignored every red flag, convincing myself that this year would be different, that this time I would finally earn my place at the table. Last Christmas, I discovered exactly how conditional my place in the family truly was. And this Christmas, I would make sure everyone else discovered it too. Cousin Amber arrived at last year's Christmas gathering with the same apologetic smile she'd worn since her first stint in rehab 5 years ago. At 32, she was the family's designated charity case, the one whose struggles with addiction had somehow earned her the support and protection I'd never received despite my accomplishments. "She's trying," Sam, Mom would say whenever I questioned why Amber's latest relapse was met with understanding, while my legitimate concerns were dismissed as complaints. "We need to support her through this difficult time." I had always been careful around Amber, keeping my purse close and my valuables closer. Call it instinct or experience. But I knew trouble followed her like a shadow. What I didn't expect was for her to target something that couldn't be replaced with money. My grandmother's antique locket had been her most precious possession, a delicate gold heart engraved with forget-me-nots that had been passed down through generations. When she died during my senior year of high school, she left it specifically to me in her will. For Samantha, the note read, "Who sees beauty in the details others miss." It was the first time anyone in my family had recognized that quality in me. The locket wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, but it represented the only real connection I felt to my family heritage. I wore it only on special occasions, and Christmas dinner at my parents' house certainly qualified. I had stepped away from the dinner table to use the bathroom, leaving my small purse hanging on the back of my chair. The locket had been slightly uncomfortable against my skin, so I had discreetly removed it and tucked it into the inner zippered pocket of my purse before dinner. When I returned and eventually reached for my lipstick, I immediately noticed the zipper was open and the locket was gone. My stomach dropped. I searched frantically, checking the floor, retracing my steps, growing increasingly panicked as the reality set in. Someone had taken it. I scanned the room, my eyes landing on Amber, who was laughing a little too loudly at something Eric had said. She kept touching her jacket pocket, a nervous tic I recognized from her previous episodes of dishonesty. "Has anyone seen my grandmother's locket?" I asked the table, interrupting the conversation. "I just had it before dinner." A moment of awkward silence followed, then everyone resumed talking as if I hadn't spoken. "Excuse me," I said, louder this time. "My grandmother's locket is missing. It was in my purse and now it's gone." Mom shot me her warning look. "Sam, I'm sure it's just misplaced. We can look for it after dessert." "It wasn't misplaced," I insisted, my voice tightening. "It was in the zippered pocket of my purse, and now that pocket is open and the locket is gone." Eric sighed dramatically. "Here we go again. Sam needs attention." That's when I lost my composure. I turned to Amber directly. "Empty your pockets." The table went silent. Amber's face flushed. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. Empty your pockets right now." Mom stood up. "Samantha, that's enough." "No, it's not enough," I countered, tears stinging my eyes. "That locket is the only thing I have from Grandma, and someone took it." Amber has been touching her pocket nervously since I came back to the table. Eric stood, placing a protective hand on Amber's shoulder. "You can't just accuse people because you've misplaced something. Amber has been doing really well lately. This is completely inappropriate." Amber looked up at Eric with grateful eyes, then turned to me with practiced innocence. "I would never take your locket, Sam. How could you think that?" What followed was a family meeting in the living room while dinner grew cold. Everyone took turns explaining why my accusation was out of line, how I had humiliated Amber, and how my attention-seeking behavior was ruining Christmas. "We're disappointed in you, Sam," Dad said finally, his voice heavy with judgment. "You're a successful adult now. This kind of drama isn't acceptable. No one, not one person, considered that I might be telling the truth. No one offered to help search for the locket or suggested calling the police. Instead, I was cast as the villain for daring to accuse their precious recovering addict. I left early, driving back to my empty apartment in Brooklyn with tears blurring the highway lights. I spent Christmas night alone, scrolling through pawn shop websites on the slim chance that the locket might appear. 3 weeks later, it did. A small shop in Portsmouth, just 30 minutes from my parents' house, had listed it online. I drove there immediately, paid twice its appraised value, and reclaimed the one piece of my heritage that truly belonged to me. When I called my parents to tell them I'd found the locket at a pawn shop, providing undeniable proof that it had indeed been stolen, Mom sighed. "Let's not dwell on the past, honey. Amber swears she didn't take it, and bringing it up again will only cause more problems." That was the moment I truly understood my place in the family. I wasn't just second to Eric. I was expendable. My feelings, my possessions, even obvious truths were sacrificed on the altar of family harmony. I spent the next year in minimal contact with my parents and none at all with Eric or Amber. I focused on growing my business, started therapy, and read every book on family dynamics I could find. Slowly, I rebuilt my sense of self-worth outside of their validation. The locket now stayed locked in my safe, no longer a comfort, but a reminder of painful truths. As Christmas approached again, I debated skipping the gathering entirely. But something inside me needed closure, needed to stand in that house one more time with the strength I'd built over the past year. What I didn't know then was that I had only discovered half the betrayal. The full truth was far worse than I'd imagined, and it would change everything. The decision to attend this year's Christmas wasn't made lightly. I spent hours discussing it with my therapist, weighing the potential for more hurt against my need for resolution. "What do you hope to accomplish by going?" Dr. Levine asked during our session the week before Christmas. I considered the question carefully. I need them to see me as I am now, not as the person they've decided I am. And I need to know I can walk into that house without falling apart. The truth was more complicated. Part of me hoped for a miracle, that somehow my family would have spent the year reflecting on their treatment of me and would welcome me with genuine remorse. The rational part knew better. My preparation was methodical. I selected gifts with care, especially for Eric, whose package contained more than he could possibly imagine. I practiced responses to potential provocations. I visualized myself remaining calm and centered regardless of what happened. I also had evidence. After finding the locket, I'd done some investigating. The pawn shop owner remembered who had brought it in and provided a description that matched Amber perfectly. But there was more. Security camera footage showed she hadn't come alone. The grainy video revealed Eric waiting in the car, and the time-stamped receipt for the transaction matched a text he'd sent me claiming he was working late. For months, I sat on this information, unsure what to do with it. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, I received a group text from Eric to the entire family that read, "Can't wait to see everyone for Christmas. Some exciting news to share." Mom called immediately after. "Eric might be announcing an engagement," she whispered excitedly. "He and Jennifer have been getting serious. And he asked about Grandma's ring last month." The same grandmother who had left me her locket had also left her diamond ring to my mother, with the understanding it would go to Eric when the time was right. The injustice of Eric receiving another family heirloom while participating in the theft of mine crystallized my decision. The 3-hour drive to my parents' house on Christmas Day gave me plenty of time to second-guess myself. Snow dusted the highway, transforming the familiar route into something out of a holiday card. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as memories flooded back with each passing landmark. There was the ice cream shop where Dad would take us after Little League games, always ruffling Eric's hair and saying, "My champion deserves a treat." The library where I'd spent countless hours while Eric's games and practices took priority over my schedule. The high school where Eric's jersey hung in the trophy case, while my perfect GPA went unmentioned at graduation. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, already lined with familiar cars, my resolve had hardened. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick that matched my dress. I looked successful, confident, unbreakable. It wasn't entirely an act anymore. The front door opened before I could knock, Mom appearing with her camera-ready smile. "Samantha, you made it." Her hug was brief, perfunctory. "Everyone's already here." The house looked exactly as it always did at Christmas. The same decorations, the same pine-scented candles, the same family photos where Eric featured prominently in the foreground while I was partially visible in the background. Uncle Pete and Aunt Diane offered awkward greetings, clearly remembering last year's drama. Cousins Mike and Jennifer discussed their recent ski trip, pausing their conversation just long enough to acknowledge my presence. My father gave me a stiff side hug, immediately returning to his discussion about property taxes with Uncle Pete. And then there was Eric, holding court in the living room, his arm draped casually around his girlfriend's shoulders. He looked up as I entered, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence this year," he said, voice dripping with false warmth. "We were taking bets on whether you'd show up or find some work emergency." "I wouldn't miss Christmas," I replied evenly. "I brought gifts." Always the overachiever, he smirked, turning back to his audience. I placed my carefully wrapped packages under the tree, keeping one small gift bag separate. From across the room, I spotted Amber, who quickly averted her gaze when our eyes met. She was perched on the arm of the sofa, already holding a glass of wine despite her supposed sobriety. Mom fluttered around offering appetizers and collecting empty glasses, her nervous energy palpable. "Dinner's almost ready," she announced. "Robert, can you check if the turkey needs another 10 minutes? I moved toward the kitchen, offering to help. "No need, honey," Mom said quickly. "Everything's under control. Just relax and mingle." Mingle. As if I were a guest at a cocktail party rather than a daughter home for Christmas. For the next hour, I navigated the subtle landmines of family conversation. Deflected questions about my love life, nodded through thinly veiled criticisms disguised as concern. Maintained my composure when Eric loudly discussed his recent promotion. Making sure to mention his salary was finally catching up to whatever Sam claims to make with her little website business. Through it all, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were observing a play I'd seen too many times before. The roles were all the same, the dialogue predictable, but this time I had rewritten the ending. When Mom finally called everyone to dinner, I sensed the evening was about to take its fateful turn. The dining room table gleamed with Mom's best china and crystal, name cards placed at each setting. I scanned the table, looking for mine, a sinking feeling growing as I confirmed what I'd suspected might happen. There was no place set for me. The dining room looked like something from a holiday magazine spread. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations this year. The table stretched beneath a crystal chandelier, each place setting meticulously arranged with the good china, polished silverware, and crystal glasses that only appeared for special occasions. A centerpiece of pine boughs, red candles, and silver ornaments ran down the middle of the table, and soft Christmas music played from the living room speakers. Each setting had a carefully calligraphed name card propped against the water glass. I slowly walked around the table, looking for mine, even though I already knew what I would find, or rather, what I wouldn't find. My suspicions were confirmed. Every family member had a designated spot at the table. Uncle Pete and Aunt Diane, cousins Mike and Jennifer, Eric and his girlfriend Melissa, Amber, Mom and Dad at either end. Even my little cousin Tommy had a booster seat ready at the corner. Everyone except me. I stood silently, the weight of the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate exclusion. "Mom," I finally said, my voice steadier than I expected. "There's no place for me." Conversations around me stuttered to a halt. Mom looked up from where she was adjusting the centerpiece, her expression flickering between embarrassment and annoyance. "Oh, well," she stammered, not quite meeting my eyes. "We're a bit tight on space this year." "I didn't think you'd mind." "Mind what?" I pressed, though I knew exactly what was coming. Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother set up a nice TV tray in the living room. You can watch the Christmas parade while you eat." Or, Mom added, her voice artificially bright, "You can eat in the car if you'd prefer some quiet. I know how you like your space." The suggestion hung in the air, so absurd that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. Eat in the car? On Christmas? While everyone else gathered around the family table. Before I could respond, Eric let out a snort. "Why would we waste a seat on you? After last year's performance, you're lucky to be invited at all." His words landed like a physical blow. I looked around the room, searching for anyone, just one person, who might defend me or acknowledge the cruelty of the situation. Aunt Diane looked down at her plate. Uncle Pete suddenly became very interested in adjusting his tie. Dad busied himself with the wine bottle. Mom fluttered her hands nervously, straightening silverware that was already perfectly aligned. And then my eyes fell on Amber. Comfortably seated between my cousins, a satisfied smirk playing at the corners of her mouth as she watched my humiliation unfold. Amber, who had stolen my grandmother's locket and caused the rift that had torn through my family. Amber, who had faced no consequences while I had been cast as the villain. Amber, who had conspired with my own brother to pawn a family heirloom for quick cash. Something shifted inside me in that moment. The hurt transformed into a calm, clear resolve that I had never felt before. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. Done apologizing for taking up space in my own family. Done pretending that any of this was normal or acceptable. I slowly reached into my purse and pulled out the small, elegantly wrapped gift bag I had kept separate from the others. The one intended specifically for Eric. "You know what?" I said, my voice quiet but unwavering. "I think I'll pass on dinner altogether." Eric rolled his eyes. "Here comes the drama." "Right on schedule." I approached him, placing the gift bag beside his plate. "Before I go, I brought you something special. A Christmas revelation, you might say." Confusion crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in close, keeping my voice low enough that only he could hear me. "Check under your plate after I leave. Consider it my gift to the family." The truth finally unwrapped. Then I straightened up, addressing the room with a smile that felt foreign on my face. "Merry Christmas, everyone. Enjoy your dinner." As I turned to leave, Mom called after me. "Samantha, don't be ridiculous. We can set another place." But it was too late. The damage was done, the truth was set in motion, and I was already walking toward the door. My heart pounding but my steps steady. "Sam," Dad's voice sharper now. "This is childish." I didn't respond, didn't turn back. I collected my coat from the hall closet, slipped on my boots, and walked out into the snowy evening, the door closing firmly behind me. In my car, I sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, breath fogging the windshield. I hadn't started the engine yet. I was waiting for the inevitable moment when Eric would find what I'd left for him, and the carefully constructed facade of our family would finally shatter. Through the frosted windows of the dining room, I could see shadowy figures taking their seats. I imagined the uncomfortable conversation about my abrupt departure, Eric's dismissive comments, Mom's attempts to salvage the holiday spirit. And then, any minute now, Eric would lift his plate to inspect whatever I had supposedly left underneath, if only to mock me further. What he would find was a sealed envelope containing printed screenshots of text messages between him and Amber discussing the locket, planning its sale, and splitting the proceeds. Messages I had obtained from Amber's iCloud account that she'd unwittingly left logged in on my old iPad during last year's Christmas visit. Along with the screenshots was a copy of the pawn shop receipt and a still from the security footage showing Eric waiting in his car outside the shop. I watched the dining room window, counting down in my head. Any second now. My phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen. At the same moment, the front door flew open and my father appeared, scanning the driveway until his eyes landed on my car. The chaos had begun. Sitting in my car with the engine off, I had a perfect view of the unfolding drama through the dining room window. The warm yellow light from inside contrasted with the blue-white snow gathering on the sill, creating an almost theatrical effect, as if I were watching a play rather than the implosion of my family. My phone continued to ring. Mom's calls, one after another, interrupted only by text messages that popped up on my screen. Samantha, what is this? Call me immediately. This is unacceptable. I silenced the phone, setting it face down on the passenger seat. What was happening inside was exactly what I had anticipated. What I had planned for over the past year of isolation and reflection. Through the window, I could see Eric standing now, gesturing wildly with the papers in his hand. Even from a distance, his face was visibly flushed, mouth moving rapidly as he offered what I imagined were desperate denials. Amber had pushed back from the table, her hands covering her face. Mom appeared to be crying, Dad's arm around her shoulders as he stared at the documents Eric was waving. I closed my eyes, thinking back to what I had left for them to find. The evidence had been meticulously collected and preserved over months of patient investigation. It had started with the pawn shop. After reclaiming my grandmother's locket, I had struck up a conversation with the owner, a sympathetic older man named Frank who had been in business for 30 years. Beautiful piece, he had said as he handed it back to me. Shame your cousin needed cash so badly. I froze. My cousin? Frank had nodded. Young lady, maybe 30? Blonde, kind of jittery. Said it was a family piece she'd inherited. Seemed in a hurry. He paused. She wasn't alone. Had a guy waiting in the car outside. I remember because he kept honking for her to hurry up. That night, I'd called the pawn shop's security company and, for a fee that had made my credit card wince, obtained footage from their parking lot camera. The grainy video clearly showed Eric's distinctive red Audi and a timestamp that matched the transaction receipt for the locket. But the real smoking gun came from Amber herself. During last Christmas's visit, she had asked to use my iPad to check some emails while staying at my parents' house. In her haste or carelessness, she had never signed out of her iCloud account, giving me access to her message history when I picked up the iPad weeks later to sell it. What I found had made me physically ill. Eric, did you get it? Amber, yes. In her purse, just like you said. Zip pocket. Eric, don't let anyone see. Meet me after dinner. Pete's Pawn on Route 9. Amber, how much do you think we'll get? Eric, enough to split. You get your half, I get mine. Win-win. Amber, what if she notices right away? Eric, she will. But who's going to believe her over us? Just stick to the story. There were dozens more exchanges, dating back months before Christmas, discussing their financial problems and plotting the theft. Eric, it seemed, had significant gambling debts he was hiding from the family. Amber needed cash for reasons left unspecified but easily guessed. They had targeted me because they knew no one would take my side. They had been right. Until now. A sharp knock on my car window jolted me back to the present. Dad stood there, his breath fogging the glass, snow collecting on his shoulders. His face held an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of anger, confusion, and something that looked surprisingly like shame. I hesitated, then pressed the button to lower the window halfway. Sam, he said, his voice hoarse. What is this? What have you done? I've told the truth, I replied simply. Something this family isn't very familiar with. You need to come inside. We need to talk about this as a family. I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. A family? Is that what we are? Because families don't tell one member to eat in their car on Christmas while everyone else sits at the table. Dad winced. Your mother didn't mean it like that. Yes, she did. And so did Eric. I met his eyes steadily. What's happening in there? Is he denying it? Is Amber? Because the evidence is pretty clear. Dad's shoulders slumped. He tried to deny it at first. Then Amber broke down and admitted everything. She said it was Eric's idea from the start. And everyone is. It's chaos in there, Sam. Eric stormed out the back door. Amber is hysterical. Your mother is beside herself. I nodded slowly. So now you believe me. A year too late. Sam, please. Come inside. My phone lit up again with Mom's call. This time, I picked up, putting it on speaker. Samantha. Her voice was trembling. Samantha, please come back inside. We need to talk about this. In the background, I could hear raised voices. Someone crying, the sound of something breaking. The perfect Mitchell family Christmas was shattering along with the illusions they had maintained for so long. Talk about what, Mom? About how Eric and Amber stole from me and lied about it. Or about how none of you believed me. Or maybe about how you suggested I eat Christmas dinner in my car while the real family gathered around the table. Please, she whispered. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. It always has been. I ended the call and looked back at my father, who stood shivering in the snow, looking suddenly older than his 62 years. Dad, I'm not coming inside to fix this for everyone. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen so we can salvage Christmas dinner. Not this time. Then why did you come at all? He asked. Why bring all this up today if you didn't want to work things out? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself many times during the drive here. Because I needed you all to see the truth. Not just about the locket, but about how this family works. About who matters and who doesn't. About the lies we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. I paused, feeling the weight of the words. I came because I needed to be the one to walk away this time, not the one who gets pushed out. From inside the house came the sound of the back door slamming. Eric had returned. More raised voices followed, the indistinct but unmistakable sound of a family in crisis. Dad looked torn between staying with me and returning to the chaos inside. Sam, whatever mistakes we've made, we're still your family. I started the engine, the car rumbling to life beneath me. That's the thing, Dad. Family is supposed to be the people who believe in you when no one else does. Who stand by you no matter what. Who make space for you at the table. I put the car in reverse. You might be my relatives, but you stopped being my family a long time ago. As I backed out of the driveway, snowflakes swirling in my headlights, I caught one last glimpse of my father standing alone in the cold, watching me leave. Behind him, through the dining room window, shadows moved in frantic patterns, gesturing, confronting. The perfect Christmas dinner forgotten. My phone continued to light up with calls and messages as I drove away, but for the first time in my life, I felt no obligation to answer. No desperate need to explain myself or make things right. The truth was finally out there. What they did with it was no longer my responsibility. I didn't go far. The rational part of my brain had known I wouldn't actually drive away, not yet. Instead, I pulled into the small park at the end of my parents' street. The same park where I'd spent countless hours as a child reading books while Eric's baseball games commanded our parents' attention. Snow was falling more heavily now, coating the empty playground equipment in a pristine white blanket. I sat there with the heater running, watching fat flakes disappear into the windshield wiper's rhythm, trying to process the tangle of emotions coursing through me. Vindication, yes, but also a profound sadness for what could have been, for what should have been. My phone had finally stopped its incessant buzzing. Either they had given up, or they were planning their next move. I wasn't sure which possibility I preferred. 20 minutes passed before headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. A car pulled up beside mine, and I recognized my father's sedan. He got out, hunched against the snow, and approached my window. This time, I rolled it down completely. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the passenger seat. I nodded, unlocking the door. He slid in beside me, bringing with him a gust of cold air and the faint scent of Mom's turkey dinner. For a long moment, we sat in silence, watching the snow fall in the glow of the park's single streetlight. When he finally spoke, his voice was different than I'd ever heard it, stripped of its usual authority and certainty. "I don't know where to start," he said. "That makes two of us." He turned to face me, and I was startled to see tears in his eyes. My father, who prided himself on emotional control, who had taught Eric that Mitchell men don't cry, was weeping openly. "I failed you," he said simply. "We all did. But I was supposed to protect you, to make sure you were treated fairly, and I didn't do that. Not today, and not for a very long time." The straightforward admission caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, justifications, perhaps even anger. Not this raw honesty. "Why?" I asked. The question that had haunted me for years. Why was it always so different for me and Eric? Dad rubbed his hands together, buying time. "I've been asking myself that since I saw those messages." The easy answer is that Eric was the firstborn, the son I always wanted, the athlete I never was. But that's not enough of a reason. Not for how things played out. He paused. The harder truth is that Eric needed more. He struggled in school where you excelled. He needed constant validation where you seemed self-sufficient. Somewhere along the way, we confused need with deserving. So I was punished for being capable. Not intentionally, but effectively, yes. He looked down at his hands. "Your mother and I told ourselves that you were stronger, that you could handle being overlooked sometimes because you had so many other gifts. We told ourselves we were being fair by giving Eric more attention because you had everything else going for you. But we weren't being fair at all." A car door slammed in the distance, and I looked up to see Mom hurrying across the park toward us, her coat hastily thrown over her Christmas dress, snow clinging to her hair. Dad followed my gaze and sighed. "She insisted on coming. Said she couldn't wait another minute." Mom reached the car, opening the back door and sliding in, her face streaked with tears and smudged makeup. "Samantha," she breathed, reaching for my shoulder. "Please forgive me." I tensed under her touch. "For which part, Mom? For not believing me about the locket? For letting everyone treat me like I was crazy? Or for suggesting I eat Christmas dinner in my car while Amber got a seat at the table?" Mom flinched. "For all of it. For everything. I've been a terrible mother to you." "Not terrible," I said quietly. "Just selectively attentive." "No, terrible," she insisted. "I've spent the last hour realizing how many times I've let you down, how many times I chose peace over justice, how many times I sacrificed your feelings to protect Eric's ego or Amber's fragile sobriety." She leaned forward. "What I said today about eating in the car, I don't even know where that came from. It was so cruel, so thoughtless. The moment it left my mouth, I wanted to take it back, but then Eric said what he said, and I just froze." Dad cleared his throat. "We both did. We've been freezing for years whenever confronted with how unfairly we've treated you." A tense silence filled the car. Outside, the snow continued to fall, encasing us in a quiet cocoon separate from the rest of the world. Finally, I asked the question that mattered most. "What about Eric? What did he say when Amber confessed?" Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "At first he tried to blame it all on Amber," Dad said. "Claimed she was lying to save herself. But when I showed him the timestamp on the pawn shop receipt matching his text to you about working late, he couldn't explain it away. He stormed out," Mom added. "But he came back a few minutes later, I think." I think he wanted to catch you before you left." As if summoned by her words, another set of headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Eric's red Audi pulled up behind Dad's car. My stomach tightened. "Did you tell him where to find me?" "No," Dad said. "But this park was always your thinking spot." He must have remembered. Eric approached slowly, his figure illuminated briefly by the car's interior light as he opened the back door and slid in next to Mom. His face was ashen, eyes red-rimmed. He looked nothing like the confident, smirking brother who had suggested they wouldn't waste a seat on me just an hour ago. "Sam," he began, his voice barely audible over the car's heater. "I don't know what to say." "The truth would be a good start." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I did it. All of it. It was my idea to take the locket. I convinced Amber to grab it while you were in the bathroom. I drove her to the pawn shop. I split the money with her." He paused, shoulders slumping. "And when you accused her, I helped turn everyone against you. I made them think you were being paranoid and dramatic. I knew exactly what I was doing." The confession hung in the air between us. Part of me had expected him to continue denying it despite the evidence, to find some way to twist the narrative as he had always done. "Why?" I asked, the same question I'd asked our father. "Why would you do that to me?" Eric's face contorted. "Because I was drowning in gambling debts. Because I needed money and I knew no one would give me any more after I'd already borrowed from everyone. Because the locket was valuable and convenient." He took a shaky breath. "And because I knew I could get away with it. I knew no one would believe you over me." His last words landed like a physical blow, their honesty more painful than any lie could have been. "That's a horrible thing to admit," I said. "I know, but it's the truth. I've spent my whole life knowing I could count on Mom and Dad to take my side, to make excuses for me, to believe the best about me even when I was at my worst." He glanced at our parents. "I've been their golden boy for so long that I started to believe I deserved it." Mom made a small, wounded sound. "And you know what the worst part is?" Eric continued. "I didn't even need the money that badly. I could have asked for help, could have found another way. But taking that locket, watching you get shut down when you accused us, it felt good. Like I was finally getting back at you for being better than me at everything that actually matters." "I was never better than you," I said. "I was just different. We could have both mattered." Eric nodded slowly. "I see that now. But for a long time, I convinced myself that your success somehow diminished mine. That there was only so much approval to go around, and if you got some, there would be less for me." "That's not how love is supposed to work in a family," I said. "No," Dad interjected. "It's not. And that's on your mother and me. We created this dynamic between you two. We reinforced it every time we elevated Eric's achievements and downplayed yours." I looked around at the three of them, these people who shared my blood but had felt like strangers for so long. In their faces, I saw genuine remorse. The first cracks in the roles we had all been playing for decades. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "Not right away. There's too much hurt. Too many years of feeling like I didn't matter." "We understand," Mom said, though pain flashed across her face. "We don't deserve quick forgiveness. But I'm willing to try," I continued, "to see if there's something worth salvaging here. Not for your sakes, but for mine. Because carrying this resentment has been exhausting, and I want to be free of it. Whether that means finding a way forward with you or finally letting go completely." Eric nodded. "That's more than I deserve. But I'll take it." We sat there in silence for a moment. The weight of decades of dysfunction pressing down on us, but also, perhaps, the first tentative possibility of something different. "What happens now?" Dad finally asked. I thought about the abandoned dinner, the shocked relatives, the upended holiday. "Now we go back," I said. "And we start being honest with each other and with everyone else. No more pretending, no more perfect family facade." As we prepared to return to the house, to face the curious and uncomfortable questions from extended family, I realized that regardless of what happened next, something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground, spoken my truth, and been heard. The Mitchell family would never be the same. And neither would I. The walk back to the house felt like crossing a threshold between two worlds. The old world of secrets, resentment, and unspoken rules, and a new, uncertain territory where truth, however uncomfortable, was finally acknowledged. Snow crunched beneath our feet as we made our way up the driveway in silence, each lost in private thoughts. The front door opened before we reached it. Aunt Diane stood there, concern etched across her face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Though the answer was obviously no. "We're working on it," Dad replied, his voice steadier than it had been in the car. "Is everyone still here?" "Yes. Nobody's touched dinner. We've just been waiting." Inside, the house was eerily quiet, the festive music silenced, the dining room still set with cooling food. The extended family had gathered in the living room, perched awkwardly on couches and chairs, speaking in hushed tones that stopped abruptly when we entered. Amber sat alone in a corner, eyes downcast, fingers twisting nervously in her lap. When she saw us, she stood quickly, her face pale. "Sam, I'm so sorry," she blurted out. "I never meant for it to go this far. I was desperate and Eric said no one would believe you, and..." I held up my hand, stopping her apology mid-sentence. "I don't want to hear it right now, Amber. Maybe someday, but not today." She nodded, sinking back into her seat. Dad cleared his throat. "Everyone, there's been a situation that we need to address as a family. Last year, a valuable family heirloom of Samantha's was stolen and pawned. When she accused Amber, we didn't believe her. We now know that Amber and Eric were both responsible and that we were wrong not to trust Sam's word." A murmur ran through the room. Uncle Pete shifted uncomfortably. Cousin Jennifer's eyes widened. "There's more," Mom added, her voice gaining strength. "Today, we excluded Samantha from our dinner table in a way that was cruel and inexcusable. We've realized that this is part of a pattern in our family that has gone on for far too long." Eric stepped forward. "I've been treated as the golden child while Sam has been pushed aside. I took advantage of that to do something unforgivable, and I need to take responsibility for it." The raw honesty in the room was palpable, uncomfortable, but necessary. As the extended family absorbed these revelations, I saw shock, confusion, and in some faces, the dawning recognition that they too had been complicit in the dynamics that had hurt me for so long. "What happens now?" Aunt Diane asked, echoing Dad's earlier question. Mom looked at me, deferring to my answer. "Now we eat dinner," I said simply. "But first, we rearrange the table. Everyone gets a seat, or no one does." What followed was a strangely cathartic chaos as we pulled extra chairs from the basement, rearranged the dining table to accommodate everyone, and redistributed the place settings. The perfect Christmas tableau was disrupted, becoming something messy but more authentic. As we finally settled around the now crowded table, Dad stood to carve the turkey, a tradition that had always marked the official start of our Christmas dinner. But instead of proceeding as usual, he paused, carving knife in hand. "Before we begin, I want to say something." He looked around the table, then fixed his gaze on me. "For too long, this family has operated with an unspoken hierarchy that has hurt one of our own. Today marks the end of that. From now on, everyone at this table matters equally. Everyone deserves to be heard, to be believed, and to be valued." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings, to difficult truths, and to the courage it takes to face them." The toast was met with solemn nods and raised glasses. As we began passing dishes, the initial tension gradually eased into something less strained, though far from normal. Conversations started and stopped awkwardly. Glances were exchanged. But we were eating together, all of us. And that was a start. After dinner, as everyone helped clear the table, Eric approached me in the kitchen, away from the others. I want you to have this, he said, holding out a small box. It's not the original, but it's as close as I could find. I opened it to find a gold locket, similar to our grandmother's, but clearly new, the engraving fresh and bright. I can't replace what I took from you, he said. But I want you to know I'm going to spend however long it takes making this right. I closed the box and handed it back to him. Keep it. I don't need a replacement. I have the original. I met his eyes. What I need from you is something harder than buying jewelry. I need you to do the work of understanding why you did what you did. And making sure it never happens again. He nodded, accepting the box back with a shaky hand. I will. I promise. The months that followed that Christmas were filled with difficult conversations, tentative boundaries, and slow, uneven progress. My parents suggested family therapy, a concept that would have been unthinkable before. We started meeting every other Sunday, sitting in a neutral office with a compassionate but firm therapist who helped us navigate the tangled web of our family dynamics. Eric committed to gambling addiction treatment. Amber moved to Seattle for a fresh start, her absence creating space for my own healing. Mom and Dad, to their credit, did not waver in their commitment to change. Though decades of patterns couldn't be undone overnight, there were setbacks. Mom still occasionally slipped into old habits of favoritism. Dad sometimes grew defensive when confronted with past mistakes. Eric struggled with his reduced status as just one equal member of the family rather than its centerpiece. And I had my own work to do, learning to speak up without the edge of bitterness that had become my armor, learning to trust tentatively without expecting perfection, learning that forgiveness was not a single decision, but a practice I would have to choose daily. By the time the next Christmas approached, we had established a new normal. Not perfect. Not even close, but fundamentally different from what had come before. When I arrived at my parents' house that Christmas Eve, I found Mom in the dining room, setting the table. Come see, she said, taking my hand and leading me to the place of honor at the center of the table. My name card sat there, propped against the water glass. Is this okay? We thought you should have the best spot this year. I shook my head gently. That's not what this is about, Mom. It was never about having the best spot or special treatment. It was about having any spot at all, about mattering enough to be included. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Together, we rearranged the table again, placing all the settings in a circle so that no position was more prominent than any other. Better, she asked. Much better, I agreed. That Christmas was quieter, with fewer relatives but more genuine conversation. The locket, which I wore openly now, caught the light as I leaned forward to pass the mashed potatoes to Eric. He noticed it, his eyes lingering on it briefly before meeting mine. I'm glad you have it back where it belongs, he said simply. Me too, I replied. And I was. The journey wasn't over. Might never be completely resolved. But sitting there with my imperfect family, all of us trying in our imperfect ways to do better, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. A sense of belonging. The locket around my neck was no longer just a painful reminder of betrayal. It had become a symbol of something else too, my own strength. My willingness to speak truth even when it cost me, my capacity to rebuild what had been broken on new and better terms. As we finished our meal and moved to the living room for gifts, I caught Dad watching me with a mixture of sadness and pride. What are you thinking? I asked him. That I missed so much, he replied honestly. So many years of not seeing you clearly. I can't get that time back. No, I agreed. But we have now. And tomorrow. And that counts for something. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no magical transformation that erased all the hurt and healed all the wounds. There was just this, flawed people making space for each other at an imperfect table. Choosing to stay even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And somehow, that felt like enough. Before I end this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself within your own family? How did you find the courage to speak your truth? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice and setting boundaries, even with the people who should love you most. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that you deserve a seat at every table that matters to you.